Hey all, and welcome to my first ever YouTube video. My goal with this channel is to chronicle the underrated details in the 2011 show My Babysitter's a Vampire, and I plan on making a channel preview to go more in depth on that. For now, in this video, I'm focusing on one episode in particular, the first episode after the movie, Lawn of the Dead. This is a good example of what I want to dive into with my channel because there are lore drops about characters and world building in this 20-minute silly goofy adventure that you can look into with surprisingly deep detail once you get past the show's charming and silly surface. I'm actually recording this intro after having recorded the rest of the video, and I must say that the scripting could actually use some work, even though I stand by what I say about the show's lore, and it's still a fun time just looking back on the show. I definitely made more work with myself in the editing phase because of the way I scripted it, so I can't promise that I'll do another dive into like a single episode in quite the same way. But if I do, the structure will hopefully be improved and be a more enjoyable video, and the video will be a more appropriate length for the episode length. I really see this YouTube channel as just a fun project for myself, as well as a creative writing exercise to improve my writing. So if I stick to it, we can go on this journey together, which is kind of why I pointed it out. Like, I just am here to practice writing. I also made myself a custom PNG tuber from scratch that I drew myself, but I will not be premiering it in this video because I still want to practice using it in editing, and I am really running out of time with the deadline that I made for myself already. So stay tuned for that. Now with announcements out of the way, we can get into the review. The episode starts with some light banter from Ethan and Benny, and a little bit of lore dumping about the movie, since you might be starting the show without having seen it. The movie can't have taken place over a span of more than 2 weeks, but the way they talk about it makes me think that the episode writers may not have known that. Once we were lowly high school noobs, Benny says. Yeah, dude, that was last week. It's still the first quarter of your freshman year. Things just got back to normal, Ethan says. You've known about vampires for a week at most. Benny is characterized as the more boisterous friend, while Ethan tries to rein him in. Benny is also more excited about supernatural happenings, while Ethan says he wants to be normal high schoolers, which would make for good Ethara writing if it were a more consistent detail. They kind of drop it after this episode, if I'm being completely honest. Benny also has big dreams of using his magic to win over girls, while Ethan is pretty unimpressed by these antics. Ethan is often characterized as the least girl crazy of the boy characters, which makes him seem like the most responsible and least fickle because of how that impacts the plot, and this episode is a prime example of that. Ethan's lack of enthusiasm in this scene is notable to me because Ethan doesn't show the same amount of investment in Benny's love life that Benny shows to him later on in the show. Maybe it's just because Ethan's seen this show over and over again since Benny seems to have a new all-consuming crush every week. Notice that Ethan's shirt here has one spade on the graphic, and while the show's costumers may not have been thinking of the Ace of Spades as a symbol of the Airways community, I definitely am. So this to me is an Airways Ethan scene. An angelic note plays as Benny looks at this girl from their school, Della, who has a depressed look on her face. Benny's characterization as being insensitive and having intense yet surface level fixations on girls is kept consistent from the movie and is present all throughout this episode. Ethan tells Benny to keep his magic on the down low, I guess because Grandma must have said to, but we're not really given a reason as to why, which is kind of unusual in my opinion for these shows. There's usually a reason of like magic users being in danger from, I don't know, the government or something. Who knows? Maybe casters in this universe have a similar bureaucracy to the vampires that relies on maintaining relative secrecy from normies. On the other hand, maybe Grandma was just worried about other casters finding out about Benny, and given what happens in the following episode where Benny not revealing his magic to a witch might have saved him, I don't say I blame her if that is the case. And as Ethan talks about like how important it is to keep magic on the down low, his face is in full focus to emphasize how important this completely unexplained statement is to the episode's plot. It also means the shippers are probably eating this scene up, and I respect it. Benny does not appear to be hiding his magic at all whenever he grabs a bouquet out of thin air without so much as a line saying that mortals never see what's right in front of them. He's gonna be a problem this episode. And Ethan should probably be more concerned, but instead turns all of his attention to Sarah as soon as she asks. Either he's given up on trying to stop Benny, or doesn't see his actions as truly a threat, despite having said otherwise. So Sarah's here now, and she wants to borrow $20. She's laying on that guilt with the shy friend line. Ethan probably doesn't have the money based on his face, but Sarah keeps going. She says it's for a good cause, but if she was ever gonna elaborate, she gets interrupted. Benny, from down the hall, shrugs at Ethan to convey his awkwardness around this crying girl. He walks back to Ethan after a brief conversation and loudly announces, "Awesome news! Della's dog died." Right in the hallway. Classy as always, Benny. This kind of makes Benny seem both insensitive and unintelligent. Ethan turns to Sarah with this weirded out expression to show that he recognizes this, furthering the vibe that this episode is meant to establish a comparison and contrast between their two personalities. Benny's cluelessness is used to make Ethan seem more normal or relatable, while Benny acts in a more cartoony fashion. Sarah is immediately having none of this bullshit, and is the first to verbally backhand Benny in the same way Ethan had at the beginning of the episode. While she sought out Ethan in the hallway, she seems to be avoiding Benny because she ends her convo with Ethan right then and there and leaves. She is not interested in involving herself with random freshman drama, enforcing my belief that this is still the very beginning of the school year because she doesn't seem to be seeing Benny as her friend quite yet. Benny's newest fresh genius idea is to reanimate Della's dead dog to get her to like him. The way he says this sounds like he's trying to convince Ethan and get Ethan on board, and it almost works, seeing as Ethan nods along for a second. Benny is keenly aware that he is the more reckless friend, but he doesn't seem to necessarily want to get into these bullshit situations without having his bestie there at his side. Benny doesn't really need Ethan's help as of yet, so he's really just trying to involve them so they can both do their shenanigans together. You know, they're friends, they want to spend time together. However, as soon as Ethan does realize that Benny means to bring the dead dog back to life, he is immediately against the idea. He says, "You cannot bring your dead dog back to life," doesn't give a reason. Ethan also says, "If Harry Potter were here, he'd smack you around," which that line aged terribly. I really don't like that it's in the show, but you know, it's an old show. This line that he has about Harry Potter is also like completely inaccurate to the books. From what I can remember, it kind of shows in my mind that Ethan, similarly to Harry, is written as this like hashtag relatable guys, but these writers have a completely different idea than She Who Won't Be Named about what the average 14-year-old boy is like, because they make out Ethan to be the voice of reason instead of whatever bullshit Harry had going on, which is absolutely hilarious. The line also serves to remind us that Ethan is a nerd, while also apparently disregarding that movie lunchtime conversation about magic versus science in fantasy books, which is fine because there's really not all that much of a difference in the show in general between what science and magic usage does. Yeah, I don't really blame the writers for kind of disregarding that binary immediately. Ethan doesn't try to tell Benny that reanimation is morally wrong, or that bringing back a creature that Dylan knows was dead will make his magic usage super obvious, or that necromancy is way too hard and dangerous for Benny to use. He just says that Benny can't/shouldn't do it, and leaves the reason up to viewer interpretation, which makes him seem cautious, but also kind of like a buzzkill, to be honest. Yeah, I agree Benny's in the wrong here, but it's not like Ethan's making all that great an argument. He's just kind of shutting down Benny's idea. Benny lies to his grandma, saying he wants to learn about reanimation for a school project, which is hilarious, given that magic is apparently a secret here and would never be relevant to something his teachers would know about, let alone assign to students. Also says something to Ethan about grandma's wrinkles, which, like, damn, okay. Don't bring her appearance into this. He gets this interrogation from Grandma on video for Ethan for some reason. I don't know why he couldn't just bring Ethan along with him, since Grandma could easily watch the hockey game she's seeing with Ethan's parents that she lives next door to. Which, yeah, during the interrogation, Grandma is watching some sort of game on TV. I think it's hockey because she's wearing like a jersey, but there aren't any team logos visible, and Benny's parents aren't watching with her either. Maybe Benny wanted the game to be on during the interrogation as like a distraction, so Benny knew he'd have to get video footage instead of having Ethan with him, because Ethan would probably want to watch a game since Ethan actually likes hockey. There's definitely an episode plot about that in the second season, and in the first season it's brought up kind of briefly, but Ethan does like hockey. He would probably not want to do the interrogation, he would just be watching the game. Benny is using this interrogation footage to prove to Ethan that reanimation is possible, but I don't think that was ever Ethan's problem with this plan. I mean, their best friends are vampires. I don't think he sees reanimation as out of the realm of possibility. He just has an issue with it. Ethan tries to tell Benny that he doesn't even know how to do reanimation magic, which seems like the absolute least pressing problem here, although it does end up being plot important. Benny is completely undeterred, more concerned with whether he technically can than what consequences it would have to use this magic without proper training or supervision. But to be fair, Ethan's concern doesn't seem to consider the consequences either. Ethan's mom, Sam, brings up some food to his room, and Ethan asks about the aroma of her food. Benny says it smells like a plastic melted doll, just to remind us that he is socially clueless, but Sam doesn't point out his rudeness, even though she clearly notices. From this, we learn that Ethan's little sister Jane has canonically melted at least one of her dolls before. I like that she gets mentioned in this story, despite not being a big part of this episode, because even though this is a TV show and characters appear in whatever episode they have plot importance in, or it was convenient for them to film, real people don't just stop having siblings when they aren't in the same room. So, in this scenario, do we think Jane left the doll unattended by like a candle or something, or did she stick it in the oven because she thought it was haunted? To his credit, Benny does at least try to be polite when he declines the food Sam offers after Ethan smacks his knee. Sam seems unaware that Ethan doesn't want the ratatouille, despite obviously not being a fan of it herself. Sam acts completely unaware that Ethan doesn't want to eat the ratatouille, despite the fact that she herself is not really a fan of it either. Sam also says the gourmet dinner she's preparing for Ross's important business guests will take place on Friday, and to cancel Sarah. Sarah is Jane's babysitter every Friday because that's Ross and Sam's date night, and Ethan is still banned from babysitting. The fact that this dinner is on the same night makes it seem like it's irregular, so I don't think Ross has had work guests for dinner very frequently, if ever. Or at least before the events of this episode, because afterwards it makes perfect sense to never want to do that all again. Also, offering to feed your clients dinner out of the blue when you either aren't willing or aren't able to at least prepare some of the food yourself seems like a bad choice to me. Wanting to have a friendly and atmospheric setting is one thing, but it kind of seems like he signed up Sam for extra work she didn't really want to do. Of course, we don't actually know whether it was Ross or Sam's idea, and Sam was willing to go out of her comfort zone with this meal, which Ross has yet to comment on in either a positive or negative way, because of how important the client is. So maybe this is Sam's way of trying to be supportive in case this meeting ever ended up advancing Ross's career. Benny wants Ethan to touch some potions he stole from Grandma and use a vision to find out which is the right one, if any. How did Benny know that one of those would be right? The winning argument in Benny trying to convince Ethan is him saying to help reunite a fair maiden with her beloved pet. So Benny has to just go hard into pretending for even a second that he isn't being completely selfish, and Ethan falls for it instantly. Also, Benny calls him the nickname E, which is super cute. Maybe he just knew that fairy tale references would easily sway Ethan because it's nerd shit, and Ethan was the one who brought up wizard stuff instead of, logic and reasoning in his original argument against necromancy. Ethan gets a vision of exactly what each potion does as soon as he touches the bottle, which is precisely what he and Benny already knew would happen. Ethan just has convenient story exposition powers that work on physical contact with anything supernatural or at least magic. It's a slight update from the movie version of his powers, but in a later episode, we learn that he kind of gets updates to his powers, so to speak, over time. So it makes sense that after the initial incident that triggered his powers, he'd at least get some slight changes, and apparently some very convenient changes at that. So why does Grandma have a potion sitting around in her house to reanimate dead stuff? What does she normally use that for, that she just has it on hand? Also, why are none of her bottles labeled? Even like coded labels or something? Benny steals from Grandma again later in the show, presumably from the same shelf, so for some reason I guess Grandma decided not to start booby-trapping her magic items. She should have. In this scene, Ethan's visions show a visual shorthand for the potion's effect, with a filter and the potion's color. Ethan's vision shows a visual shorthand of the effect of every potion with a filter in the potion's color. The way Ethan's visions work, at least to me, seems like they're more to show Ethan the truth in a way that he will understand, rather than to depict something that literally happens exactly as he sees it. So, for instance, I don't think that the hand in the dirt is necessarily one that was reanimated before with this potion or one that will be in the future, but it is a visual shorthand that tells Ethan that this is the reanimation potion. Ethan sees something that helps him understand what's going on instead of getting an exact vision of the future. In Raven's home, which I watched season 1 of a while back, Raven and Booker get visions of stuff that literally happens in the future, but they can make mistakes when they interpret their visions. Ethan's visions are different because he doesn't see Della's dog, he doesn't see anything that happens in the episode, but rather has the vision more or less explain each potion using images. This prevents the show from following the same kind of self-fulfilling prophecy plotline that tons of Raven's Home episodes tend to follow. It also means that his vision explains every potion instead of focusing on the one that he will end up using, which a future vision kind of thing might do. Ethan's power isn't really to see the future, it's just that he can look into magic items in a way. Also, it's not plot relevant at all, but what does the Angry Birds potion do? I have no idea what that could possibly mean or what the logistics of that potion are. Ethan literally tells Benny straight up which potion is correct, and yet is surprised when Benny wants to use it, the reason he asked. Benny doesn't really listen to his friend any more than Erica does, to be honest. I kind of wonder what Ethan was even going to say after revealing the correct potion. Maybe he'd actually make a valid argument for once. Maybe it's supposed to be up to viewer interpretation. Like, whoever watches the show either knows an Ethan or isn't Ethan, so they should be able to fill in the blanks. Given that Ethan is supposed to be kind of like this average Joe and also voice of reason kind of archetypal guy, I would not be surprised if that's what the writers were actually going for here. Rory also shows up in the scene. He doesn't have a reason to go find his friends. He doesn't know about the bullshittery that's afoot. He just wants to see them. And that's super cute. He doesn't question why Ethan wants to follow Benny to Della's house also. He just kind of goes along with it. Rory tries to show off his vampire ninja skills, and he has a certification card. So I have lots of questions. Are there vampire ninja training gyms in the tiny ass town of Whitechapel? This isn't ever plot relevant ever again, but it is still fun and whimsical, and it made a, decent enough comedy gag for this episode. Rory also does not hesitate to lift Ethan up and fly over town to go look for Benny. Benny also, for some reason, thinks that he'll find where the dog is buried by calling its name. There's no reason that should have worked. He just kind of looks dumb right now. The sign over the burial spot is literally just cardboard with some foam paper stickers and Sharpie on it. Kind of makes me think that Della made that sign herself because her parents just don't give a shit about their own dead dog. Oh, damn. Okay, so Rory just dropped Ethan, straight up dropped him. Rory, you should know that mortals are fragile. Okay, what even was Benny's plan after this moment. He didn't even put the potion on the body, but like in the dirt, which is how the potion ends up working, but that doesn't seem very well thought out. I don't think he even thought far enough ahead as to how Della would know to thank him for the dog, or whether she'd even want a reanimated dog. Like, I know we already knew that this plan was not well thought out, but it's just really hitting me in this scene. Yeah, and once the potion starts doing its thing, Ethan and Benny just start hanging out in this random person's backyard, I guess. Also, Ethan says, "My visions are never wrong," which kind of alludes to what I was saying before, where there isn't really room for interpretation with Ethan's visions as there are with some other characters' visions in other media. He just got these powers, so I don't know how he could possibly know this enough to say it with such confidence. Also, seems like it should be a very low priority compared to everything else that's going on. I don't know why he chose to focus on that. Regardless, it's shown to be true for, like, the entire rest of the series. I think the one exception to Ethan's visions being apparently never wrong is in the following episode, 3 Cheers for Evil. Also, Rory was apparently watching them in the backyard that entire time for some reason. Della opens her, like, porch window to her bedroom, which insane amount of swag for a kid, but okay. And she, like, looks around her backyard, and the guys are still fully there. She's just not looking that hard. I don't know, maybe she wears contacts. It's also really dark outside at this point. There's not really much transition in the show in general between, like, night and day scenes. There's not really any sunset, but still, it's, like, crazy dark out. So how late at night were Ethan and Benny out doing this necromancy bullshit, and do their parents care? Why is Benny swearing on his Jedi honor all of a sudden? He has no Jedi honor. He gets attached to every girl he sees. Like, Benny has zero reason to believe he was wrong. Like, the reanimation even worked. He has the dog with him. So why is he all of a sudden promising Ethan to never reanimate animals anymore? Is he just bored of it now? Or is he just lying? Rip to that cardboard tombstone, I guess, because the sprinkler just turned on in Della's backyard. Ethan wakes up and opens his closet because, yeah, Benny made him keep the dog. And this is a visual that you guys probably all remember from the theme song and or being terrified of this episode when you first saw it. Red dog eyes, human teeth. Benny brings the dog to school in, like, a Heckbots box. That franchise gets mentioned a bunch in the series. I still have no clue what it actually is. And this box in particular gets used as a prop various times. Also, Benny wrestling the dog, which is actually just, you know, an actor throwing a box around. Hilarious. The dog was alive and fine last night, only becoming evil this morning. And we later find out that they became evil because they were possessed by demons, which makes me wonder if the dog was possessed by a demon earlier in the night, or if, like, it was just, you know, reanimated with no soul in there, or if there was already a demon soul in there and it was just chill until this morning. I'm very confused as to how that works. Also, no dog should fit comfortably in that Heckbots box. I don't know who thought that was convincing. Benny says when she, as in Della, sees Puffles, she will be all over me. And dude, that is so dumb. If Della was there to see the dog get buried, she saw the dog dead. I think she's gonna have some questions. And Benny, can you not make this all about you? I mean, we know you were being selfish already, but somehow this is worse. How are you going to explain this to her? Sarah goes up to Ethan as soon as Benny is out of earshot. She just really doesn't want to talk to Benny, I guess. She says, "What are you and dumb are you up to this time?" Harsh. Yeah, Sarah doesn't really seem to see Benny as her friend as much as she sees him as, like, a package deal with Ethan, who is her actual friend. That's a very accusatory way to open a conversation. Is there anyone else she should be mad at, but isn't? Yeah, I thought this was going to end up being about Erica. It wasn't. It was about her job. And I'll get to that in a second. But first I want to point out that that whole not asking about Ethan's problems thing, not wanting to get involved, and ignoring Benny as much as possible, that whole thing, completely over because now it affects Sarah. It has affected her personal life, so she's invested now. Sarah said that she was trying out for a new sales job, presumably to get money for that weekend trip. Pretty sure she's like literally at Ethan's house in this clip, which is kind of funny. It seems like she didn't get the job. I wonder if she got the job, she would have quit babysitting or not. Also, is Sarah actually friends with anyone? Like, I'm kind of concerned. It kind of seems like she doesn't have any friends. Like, in the movie, Erica says that Sarah is super nice to everybody, but Sarah walks up to her supposed friend in the hallway and says, "What are you and dumb are you up to this time?" Like, I feel like this series made Sarah, like, a little bit meaner than the movie did. I don't hate it, it's just something I noticed. "I know your work when I see it," Sarah says, and that feels like such a reach, given that she's known this kid for, like, what, a couple weeks? I guess Benny must have done a whole bunch of magic bullshit during the seemingly very brief time skip. I don't know, maybe that's why Ethan said things just got back to normal. Maybe Benny did something to the school for a couple weeks, and that's what actually happened during the time skip. So Ethan lies to Sarah about Puffles and about what's going on. Ethan has seemed to be embarrassed about Benny's antics in the past, so I think he just wanted to distance himself from that absolute buffoon. Ethan doesn't confide in Sarah or ask for her help at all here. This makes sense because they're still like kind of new friends, especially since they get way more involved in each other's problems later on in the show. The way she started that conversation angry does not make sense for new friends, but Ethan doesn't seem bothered by it, at least. Well, in trying to make sense of this conversation, I realized that Sarah has had to babysit every single Friday as of late, so she'd probably have been privy to several of Benny's antics since he seems to always be at Ethan's house. She would also be used to having to be stern with Ethan and saying stuff like, "You and your dumb friend used stupid magic, didn't you?" Because she's just trying to babysit and have a chill day, and they're probably doing all sorts of magic shenanigans. So Rory shows up and he talks about how the previous night he went out for a crunchy critter snack. That is a direct quote. He said a crunchy critter snack. Rory doesn't mind eating rats and such. Like, snack is such a cute and positive way to frame it. Like, he went out to the city and went in an alley and ate a rat whole. And he's like, you know, a cute snack. Like, he's so unserious. Vampires can apparently regrow fingers as part of their healing power. I might have things to say about that, but I'm gonna keep it to myself until I do my vampire power set video. When Sarah finds out the truth about Puffles, she just rolls her eyes and says, "Unbelievable." Like, yeah, she's annoyed, but she doesn't care enough to help. Classes end up getting canceled due to reports of rabid animal attacks. Okay, sure, that could happen. Admin is not even aware of the rabid animal attack that happened in their building. They're just canceling classes for the shits. They waited for everyone to get to school to announce it, and everyone at school walked home, so the other students probably encountered these rabid, quote-unquote, undead animals as well. I wonder if anyone died during the events of this episode, and we just didn't know. That seems plausible, actually. There's a lot of killing things that happens in this show. Ethan suggests to tell Grandma what's going on, and Benny doesn't want to because he doesn't want to get in trouble, and even goes so far as to say that it's probably already over, despite having no reason to believe this, which is honestly in character. And Ethan just gives in, which is becoming very in character at this point. It's on the news though, so Grandma will definitely figure it out very quickly. So we learn in this scene that Ethan used to have a pet painted turtle named Tiberius. Benny knows and remembers this, so they were definitely childhood friends, at least for the past 8 years, maybe, if Benny met this turtle in person. I wonder if Benny and Ethan always lived next door to each other, or if Benny used to just always be there visiting his grandma before he ended up officially moving in. The way that the scene is framed makes it seem like that turtle definitely died, but both those kids just think he ran away for some reason. Grandma finds out, because, like I said, it's on the news, and she teleports directly into the house. Very scary queen shit. She wants those kids to be scared of her, to be honest. You know, they probably would have fessed up before bringing the dog to school if they weren't scared of her. So Grandma ropes the kids into helping her make anti-potion, and like, what is anti-potion actually? Is there an anti-potion for every potion, or does anti-potion nullify a variety of potions? I feel like this should have been more relevant in the series, to be honest, but it's really just in this episode. Demon critters just need the anti-potion to touch them to stop being demons. So these rabid undead animals are kind of just being referred to generically as demon critters now, and the anti-potion just needs to touch them for the spell to be undone. And the animals are like demons now. They're possessed by demons. I'll get to that in a second. A few drops of undeading potion was way too much, apparently. Is this true for all potions, or is it just that one? I don't know. Grandma says, you reanimated the bodies, but the souls had moved on. So I guess even when the animals were being chilled, that can't have been their own soul that was in the body, because their own soul went to like dog heaven or whatever. Grandma also says that a body with no soul is a demon's playground, which to me sounds relevant to Jesse because he was rumored to be a demon, and vampires are sometimes referred to as like soulless beings, though that is also disputed within the show. But yeah, like Jesse's cult in the book that Ethan read in the movie, they were like rumored to be demons or something. Also, the body and the soul apparently have to be separated from one another before a demon takes control of it in this particular case. But later on in this actual season, actually, there's kind of a dispute to that. So Grandma has this magic flute, and the sound of the enchanted flute attracts demons. Is it just the demons that are in the animal bodies? Are there other demons running around? I don't know, maybe. For the purposes of this episode, I guess it just only attracts the demons that are possessing the animals. It did not work on Rory or Sarah, so I think it's safe to say that vampires are not demons. Once the demons get lured to the group via magic flute stuff, the gang has to use anti-potion on them all. Grandma wants Benny to stay in the house with her to help make the anti-potions. Their role as casters are honestly pretty similar, even though Benny isn't an earth priest like Grandma, but Grandma's like the main one who teaches him stuff. I don't know what really makes the difference between a wizard caster and a priest caster. It's kind of not really made clear. Calling Rory was actually Grandma's idea first, literally as soon as Ethan said he had to go to dinner that night. So she's kind of letting Ethan off the hook, but not Rory, I guess, even though he's not really involved. So Grandma definitely does care about Ethan having to miss dinner and didn't want him to get in trouble with Ross and Sam. Maybe to help ensure that they wouldn't eventually have to be let in on vampire stuff, or maybe because Grandma just saw Benny as more at fault and didn't want Ethan to get into equal trouble. I don't know. Grandma has probably known Rory for years since he was already friends with Benny and Ethan at the start of the movie, so presumably they were friends through at least all of middle school. And Grandma willingly involved Rory when he wasn't already involved as far as she knew, but she didn't necessarily say anything about Sarah. She didn't suggest to have Sarah help, even though Sarah's probably more competent than Rory. She just sees this as like some level of annoyance, or maybe she just thought of Rory first because she knew him for longer. Sarah is apparently making double her babysitting rate, so that brings her up to like, what, $40, $50 a night to be a waiter at the family dinner, I guess. I don't know, she like dresses up and everything. And probably to like help finish cooking and later to help clean up. Actually, she does all the cleanup, to be honest. Ross is on my list for this, okay? Sam had to call in backup. Why would Ross make her do that much for a dinner party that she had to call in backup? I feel like Sam should have been consulted on this. Sarah immediately insults Ethan's sweater vest. I'm actually starting to doubt Erica's claim that Sarah's always nice to everyone. I don't know, maybe Sarah just already knew that Ethan also hates it. You know, they know each other that much, even though they're really not that good of friends yet. Ethan tries to participate in the like half-hearted banter, and he's like, there goes your tip, but Sarah just said that she was struggling with money. I don't know, it seems like an insensitive thing to make a joke about. But at the very least, with this little banter scene, they're matching each other's energy. Maybe this is cute for them. It's not that cute to me. Also, Sarah noticing that sweater vest, to me, has like the exact same energy as Benny noticing the fudgesicle. Like, she just cannot wait to say something about it. Also, yeah, Sam definitely does have a way to contact Sarah without Ethan's help. She just made him call her that one time for fun, I guess. I'm telling you, Sam is just the #1 Ithara shipper. Benny shows up to the house with like a belt full of Nerf darts, which is apparently appropriate dinner party attire, I guess. And also, what was his plan? Those were never gonna do anything to the demons. Like, he's carrying a water pistol. What is he doing with this belt full of Nerf darts? Benny also immediately jumps on the making fun of Sarah train and asks for a decaf triple mocha latte, no foam, which is something that does again, like later in the series. There's like a coffee-based episode. I think it's interesting that they brought that joke back, you know. Yeah, Benny is very quick to start making fun of Sarah, so, you know, in a way it makes sense that she was avoiding him so much before and is now threatening him with a cast iron frying pan. Maybe these three are all just shitheads and they belong together. None of Ethan's family members have anything to say about Benny joining them for dinner, so does he just always eat dinner at their house? Like, they don't normally do family dinner. I guess they're just used to feeding Benny too. Benny immediately asks Stella about Puffles. It's not even helpful information. He was just being a shit at this point, to be honest. Benny, Ethan, and Rory end up talking about the demon animal situation. Yeah, there's been some new developments. Rory was kind of stupid. Anyways, what Ethan says is, Rory, shut up. You know the rules about plans involving Santa, which raises more questions than it answers, but we don't have time to unpack all of that. Somehow, I don't know how, the flute enchantment still works over a recording. I guess it's about the sound of the flute. Do you even have to enchant the flute, or do you just have to make it sound enchanted? I'm very confused as to how that could possibly work. Also, Rory can in fact shred on the flute. Grandma just said to play it, and that the flute was magical and would attract the demons, but Rory chose to make it sound pretty and play a song, and the song is now in the chimney, so the demons are on their way to the house. But on the plus side, Rory's really good at music. Sarah slightly embarrasses herself at the dinner table because she is being careful to not reveal the demon rat to the dinner party due to that group's just inexplicable commitment to secrecy when it comes to magic bullshit. I don't have a comment per se to Ethan's reaction to seeing a kitchen full of demon animals. I just wanted to put a picture of his face because, like, that facial reaction, it's yeah, the perfect amount of dramatic for this show. So yeah, the kitchen is full of the demon animals, and most of them are raccoons, so I guess most of the closest dead animals to Della's yard are raccoons. Not sure why we needed that information. Actually, isn't all dirt made of dead stuff? How much decay is allowed to happen before the resurrection becomes impossible? You know, judging by the state of these corpses, there's no way that turtle thing on TV was actually Tiberius, who died 8 years ago. Ethan just latched onto the first undead painter turtle he saw. Demon-possessed animal corpses with red glowing eyes and presumably the same very creepy human-like teeth as Puffles are all over the kitchen, apparently close enough to the music store so that they've stopped trying to follow it and are now doing whatever the hell they want. Benny and Sarah both have water pistols filled with what I assume is anti-potion, but it works in a somewhat similar fashion to holy water on the show.
Slight unscripted interjection here. When I first watched the episode, I assumed that the anti-potion was holy water because I didn't fully hear what Grandma called it. Based on the way that the animals react to having anti-potion sprayed on them, you would think that it was the same thing as holy water because it literally looks like the exact same effect as the holy water on vampires, which is what led me to believe what I end up saying in the rest of this video, that their soul was burning up and that led their body to burn up. Whereas since anti-potion is supposedly acting against the potion effect of reanimating the bodies, it is equally possible that the anti-potion first disintegrated the bodies and then the souls within, or banished the demon souls to some sort of afterlife by burning the animal bodies. I really think that the best storytelling decision would have been to just make the spray guns have holy water in them instead of a whole new thing, because holy water actually has some lore within other episodes of the show and of course the movie, whereas anti-potion ends up not having any relevance. So I kind of made my analysis just under the assumption that they act in the same way, and while that might not be completely true to the actual lore, we don't really have any evidence from other episodes to suggest otherwise, and it still made for very entertaining analysis. So I will end this little interjection here and allow that to continue.
As soon as any anti-potion hits the demon critters at all, their entire body dissolves into a puff of white smoke and purple sparks as the animal lets out a final scream, which is both gruesome and comedic and stuff. As we know, the actions of the animal bodies are not being carried out by animal souls, but by demons possessing them. So what exactly does the anti-potion do? I'll get more into it in my eventual vampirism lore video, hence my mentioning of holy water, but souls and bodies are very closely linked in MBAV monster logic. Killing the body doesn't necessarily destroy a soul, but can allow it to move on, while killing a soul almost invariably destroys the entire body, particularly in this dissolving manner. The anti-potion must have destroyed the demon soul, thus corroding the body it inhabited from the inside out, despite that body housing a soul it didn't belong to. Ethan gets tossed a water pistol as well, and his spoken line reminds us exactly which adjective does not describe the situation. Understatement of the century, man. Good ol' Ethan. Rory, on the other hand, is clueless as ever and eats this demon rat alive, or, well, undead, fur and all, doused in clam sauce. What kind of dinner was Sam making? Eating an animal filled with demon soul did absolutely nothing to Rory's health. This shot with Ethan trying to stop his dad from seeing into the kitchen just kind of makes it look as if the entire kitchen was in full view from the dining room the whole time, which is a very hilarious possibility. That is what's really hilarious, despite whatever Ross is referencing with this line. The music here, I don't know, it was interesting to me. The way they change in between the very tense music and the very chill music. It's good for comedic timing and stuff. Plot irrelevant, but this painting has the Arrowways colors. Let's fucking go. I believe it's this particular moment where it is first mentioned in canon that Ross's job is related to insurance, but I'm still not sure what job precisely that he has. Ethan smacks a dead bunny off of Benny's back and shoots it with the anti-potion, and makes a little quip about hair on your back that he thinks it's funny, but if that really were a hair, exercising its demons would not make it any less scary. Hairs are terrifying and huge. I think this is meant to be funny or shocking just because bunnies are super cute and Ethan just hits one and kills it in the span of 2 seconds and, cracks a joke. It doesn't land for me, but then again, I'm not 12 years old, so do with that what you will. The CGI dog that was in the cabinet gets immediately replaced with a stuffed animal. Actors trying to convincingly fight a stuffed animal might be a favorite trope of mine, or at least it's a detail about these kind of shows that I often notice. I'm pretty sure there's only one person actually in the room for this shot, but there's a recording of Sarah shouting Ethan's name that plays over the scene. It's actually not the only time this over-recording thing happens, nor is it the only time a random Ithara moment gets shoved into a high-stakes seed in a kind of inorganic way. Yeah, they really go ham with the animal violence in this episode. One thing I respect out of the show is its ability to just fully commit to what they're doing and keep doing it over and over again until it gets goofy. The show has a semi-running gag about the Twilight parody, Dusk, and if you've seen just the MBAV movie, you know the writers leaned hard into that aesthetic and tried to make vampire romance as cheesy and funny as possible. And in my opinion, the same technique is kind of being used here, except with cutesy demon woodland critters and animal violence. Now I think of it, there is no way that Ethan's family and their dinner guests can't all hear what's going on. This seems like it would be a really loud fight, right? Actually, we do cut back to them, and all we hear is just elevator music. The music, I think, really contributes to the comedic timing here. Jane is being a perfect angel child, as per usual. She can do no wrong. Both the sound effects and face acting on the show are just as goofy and over the top as the writing, but I think this moment especially is something to highlight if you're paying attention to that. The actor playing Della must have really worked on that voice because every single line she says sounds so heartbroken in every single scene. Della's father is once again the worst, most annoying character by implying that she's crazy to Sam, who very nearly made the mistake of expressing concern for a grieving child. Yeah, I guess none of the adults can actually hear all of the obvious ruckus in this house, or maybe they're actively ignoring it, which actually, now I think of it, explains how they can live in this town for so many years and never figure out that it's just lousy with vampires and spellcasters and stuff. While the gang is fighting these demon animals, Sarah acknowledges Benny's existence for what feels like the first time in this episode, when she cues him to kill the undead dog that she and Ethan have pinned all the way up on the high cabinet for some reason. As Benny hits Puffles with the anti-potion, a bigger amount of smoke is let off than it was from the smaller animals, suggesting that the smoke isn't merely to signify magic usage, but is also directly resultant of whatever chemical reaction occurred in the body and soul. So the amount of smoke would be proportional to the size of the body that is being burned, because that actual burning is what's actually happening in the physical realm, if that makes sense. Is Sarah the only one who gets to shout other people's names in this squeaky little panic voice she uses in this episode? Damn, missed opportunity. Either way, it shows the main trio working together as a team. The trio is defeating monsters together. Puffles' dissolved body does not simply disappear. Ashes fall directly into Sam's red sauce, which is separate from whatever pasta dish she's prepared and hasn't yet been brought out for some reason. So does Puffles' collar. This is contradictory to what happened when vampire souls were destroyed in the movie, which you might think contradicts my theory that the same reaction is happening, because in the movie, the vampires' bodies and clothing are both completely corroded. But I think I can explain that away and say how it actually was the same reaction. Puffles was much smaller than a vampire and would generate less heat when he got burned away. And his collar was likely made out of a thicker material than a t-shirt. And the collar also likely had a high plastic content that would scorch and melt but not disintegrate. And Puffles had fur that might insulate the collar from the heat generated by the reaction. If we assume that the vampire's clothing disintegrated as a reaction to the heat generated by vampy souls being expunged, and not due to being metaphysically tied to their bodies and souls, it makes perfect sense that the exact same soul disintegration reaction would not destroy Puffles' collar beyond recognition, even though it did destroy all of the vampire's clothing. Was anybody looking for that mystery to be solved? I don't know, but I solved it. This is unrelated to the plot, but as somebody who has hand-painted wood grain onto set pieces, I can fairly confidently say that this wood grain on the hardwood floor in Morgan's house is fake. Oh, yeah, and this is plot relevant. Ethan manages to spill chunky red sauce, maybe meat sauce, with a dog collar in it all over Della, while trying to prevent his mom from eating and serving cremated dog remains on pasta. Benny's response to Della nearly crying in reaction to this is to tell her that it is, in fact, her dog. I know I've said it enough times by this point, but Benny is just incredibly clueless to a frankly maddening degree. And yet, Benny chases after Della through the house as she tries to walk away, still not giving up on trying to get a girlfriend out of this situation. Someone should stop him. Ethan almost tries, but will anyone else go up to bat? Like Ross, an adult who Benny would probably take the advice from? Nah. Della's parents, who reasonably should care about her feelings, let alone this kid's behavior and the fact that he might have just tried to eat her dog? Of course not. They weren't paying attention. This show doesn't go out and say it like some do, but I'm fairly convinced the only reason so many people don't believe in magic in Whitechapel is because they simply aren't paying attention to it any more than they pay attention to their own children. I guess Sarah's contract for this night also included cleanup, but Sam doesn't seem to mind Ethan staying downstairs to bug her and just not help. Honestly, I think half the reason Sarah is still employed is because Sam is just the world's biggest Ithara shipper, which is a little strange considering this is the part of the series where Sarah kind of just treats Ethan like a freshman she adopted. The way that their dynamic is kind of trying to be written at some points is different than the way it comes off, in my opinion. Similar to how I was saying that Sarah will sometimes call out for Ethan or say Ethan's name in the middle of a situation that doesn't really call for it. So it makes the shippy parts of the episode feel kind of inorganic and just shoved into random parts of the show. Although, as far as shippy moments go, Ethan deciding to stay downstairs despite not wanting to help and just wanting to bug Sarah is a fairly organic shippy moment, but not a cute one. Why is he not doing anything? Ethan takes off the sweater vest. I guess he also hates it. Sarah was right. Banter validated, I guess. Still not sure whether that earlier friendly banter scene actually lands for me, but it shows some level of continuity in the episode. And maybe shows that Ethan cares what Sarah thinks, though clearly not enough to put the discarded vest onto a surface that Sarah isn't actively trying to clean. Ethan can be just as clueless as Benny, even if the show doesn't really put a magnifying glass up to it in quite the same way. I guess Rory left at some point, probably during the fight, since Ethan seems to think that he's the one outside, which would explain why Rory wasn't helping to catch the animals. This emphasizes to me that Rory wasn't really considered part of the family dinner because, he wanted to leave before people saw him. But Benny was completely an expected and accepted guest, even for a business-related family dinner. So Sam and Ross consider Benny as at least somewhat part of the family, but also Grandma and Benny's dad must both just not cook all that often. Honestly, that's also a pretty good explanation as to why Benny always acts so overly friendly with pizza drivers, and why the movie made it seem like Benny usually ordered pizza to his own house and not to Ethan's. Ethan tells Rory that he's welcome inside before even opening the door, which I interpreted as a reference to Rory in the movie trying to get inside the house as soon as the window was open and forgetting to wait for Ethan's permission. E is just preparing for Rory's absent-mindedness. He can see it coming. It's not Rory though, it's a turtle. Ethan can't shoot the turtle that he thinks looks like Tiberius, so that might allude to a character detail that may or may not remain consistent throughout the series of like where he draws a line with violence and stuff. Here it's just played for comedy, and I guess Sarah couldn't run to the counter and grab more anti-potion in those 5 seconds for some reason because she just kind of screams at him. She does eventually get the anti-potion though after Ethan has actively been attacked. Yeah, I guess she made the mistake of having faith in that kid for like 2 seconds. Ross just sees Sarah playing with the water gun, and yeah, he's not as much of a diehard Ethara fan as Sam is. The following day, presumably, Ethan confides in Benny about finally confronting his parents regarding Tiberius. It's a cute scene. Ethan got to keep a turtle he found outside, apparently, as a kid. I feel like that should not have been allowed. I don't know why his parents would let him just take it inside and keep it. Sam and Ross also apparently had this whole heartfelt turtle funeral at a sentimentally valuable place for the turtle, purely for their own good, seeing as they didn't even tell Ethan it died. I still think there's a good chance that the turtle that Sam and Ross buried and the turtle that showed up at Ethan's house were different turtles. If the field near Della's house is a habitat that turtles live in, it'd make sense that more of them had died in the area recently enough to not have decayed. Della sees the boys walking outside and turns the other way, so they're fully just walking to talk here. If they were walking to school, Della would be headed in the same direction as them in the first place, and also, it's definitely Saturday. After Della starts walking away, Benny says, "Our courtship is on hold, at least until she gets out of counseling," which is the most concerning thing, in my opinion, that he could possibly have said. First of all, he uses the word courtship because he's a total dork, which definitely holds up my theory that he likes to use fantasy language and nerd shit language to try and get Ethan on his side, because nothing else in that sentence was remotely acceptable. Because Benny has either been asked personally by Della's school counselor to lay off her, or has been served a literal restraining order. You should not be this chill about that. Either possibility is very serious, and Benny sounds like he's just counting down the days until he's allowed to harass Della again without going to the principal's office or court. Benny is a complete scumbag as far as I'm concerned. And I don't like how a lot of shows will have an otherwise great, well-rounded character and then just also make them a complete misogynist and disrespectful to all the people around them. Ethan is also completely chill about learning this information. Maybe he's just glad that Benny seems to have waited on Della's thus far. Ethan also acts completely chill about learning this information, but maybe he's just glad that Benny seems to have waited on Della thus far and he won't embarrass the two of them in the hallway again. I guess there's really not much that Ethan can say other than that Benny really just should act more respectful, but I still wish someone would say it. Ethan asks about Grandma's punishment, which seems to be reserved for Benny instead of the both of them, so Ethan's completely off the hook since his own parents don't know anything that happened. They didn't even make him clean up after he spilled that fucking tomato sauce. To be fair, the whole problem was pretty much Benny's fault, but other times Grandma treats Benny and Ethan as they're both her kids. On the other hand, maybe she just thinks that the dinner party was punishment enough for Ethan, or thinks that Benny is solely to blame, which he is mostly to blame. We never find out what the punishment is because Sarah pulls up in her new car right at that moment. She was apparently driving without a license just like Ethan was during the movie because she brings up that she just got her license presumably that day. Sarah's driving her aunt's old car, and everyone in the series apparently drives these fancy red classic cars. It's actually kind of excessive. There's at least 3 of this kind of bright red classic car. She calls out to Ethan and Benny, and I think it's notable that she's reaching out to them to share exciting news, even though she was hesitant to share her problems before. Sarah's transportation problems with Erica's weekend trip have seemed to have been at least partly solved, though it's midday on Saturday, so Erica might already be in the city. If she is, Rory was clearly not invited because he shows up to bug the gang. This is consistent both with Erica's characterization and just the vampires in general, though we don't really meet that many other vampires yet. Regardless of whether it was a group trip or just for the 2 girls, it seems reasonable to me that Rory's just stuck at home, unaware. Benny and Ethan also act pretty eager to be rid of Rory. Dang. Ethan gets in the back seat of the car instead of sitting shotgun like he did when Sarah drove in the movie, and it's unclear at first which seat Benny takes, but the ending shot makes me think that he's also sitting in the back next to Ethan. Sarah must not be going to that vampire hangout thing, whatever it was, and I wonder how Erica took that. She probably took it really personally, knowing her. And Sarah is willing to spend the entire day hanging out with the guys, even though she had avoided them earlier, showing how much they are just brought together by working together. Sarah didn't like when Benny's magic antics got in the way of her own life, but she was way less outwardly annoyed at the boys when all 3 of them were under threat by the demon animals together, even though it was still Benny's fault and she was still, at work and trying to get money. And on that note, the episode ends.